Good afternoon. I don't know if I'm audible.
Yes, you are. Very clear. You're
Okay.
welcome, madam.
Please, just Michelle. Good afternoon, ladies and the gentlemen in the chat room. It's a pleasure to be here today and to interact with very many inspirational women and women who will lead the future of the mining sector in Africa and hopefully globally. So as you've heard, my name is Mitchele Nwambela. I currently work with the Association for Women in Energy and Extractives in Kenya. And allow me to just, share my story and maybe share the opportunities that I think I find in the mining space in Africa right now. So my background is legal. I'm not technical in the field of mining. I'm not a geologist or an engineer. I'm a lawyer by training. And when I was doing my undergraduate, there's a course that is called public interest course, which I undertook when I was in my fourth year of the university. And this led me to be in a civil society organization, a local civil society organization that worked with communities that were affected by mining activities. And so their focus was more environmental justice. And that got me working with quite a number of communities in the southern part of Kenya. Now, during this time, this was about 2014. You can guess my age, I guess, if you work backwards. During this time, Kenya was doing an overhaul review of its mining law, which was passed in 2016. But this was the time when the clamor for change was really significant in the country. We used to operate prior to the 2016 law. We were operating with a law that was designed in 1945. So this was deep, during the colonial period. Now, being attached to this local organization and me being a fourth year law student, I was charged with engaging stakeholders. Because of environmental pollution and other human rights issues, you know, in areas that mining is taking place. And so that sort of shaped everything else and my decision to be in the space that I am in now. And why women specifically? So, fast forward, I'm now a lawyer. I got an opportunity to work part time for AWIC, the Association for Women. And during that time, I interacted a lot with now women who are engaged in actual mining activities because my previous experience was mining communities communities affected by mining. And now my experience was dealing with women who are doing the actual extraction and processing of, whether it's gemstones or some of the industrial minerals, gold. And I realized that we all know the challenges that women face: gender-based violence, lack of access to finance, access to markets, access to resources such as land that would enable them to be able to scale their operations. And that sort of spurred now my deeper passion of working within the mining industry. Over the years, since 2016, 2017, thereabouts, I've done a lot of work in championing for women's involvement in the mining space, the mining policy, as well as energy, but specifically for this session, the mining aspect. Now, if you were to ask what opportunities are there, I think, Dr. Comfort, you have sort of alluded to some of them, the specific. So for me, there are strides that have been made in some countries more than others. But if I'm to just highlight some of those before we speak about the opportunities, is one, now there's more women doing STEM courses, whether it's at the university level, whether it's at the TVET and vocational training level. But we find more women getting into spaces that, a decade ago were just, we had outliers in this session. Number two is some of the progress we've also made is having a bit more women in decision-making spaces, more women leaders, more women in government positions that are able to champion for the interests and rights of women, women who lead organizations, whether it's private sector or non-profits. So that in itself, I think, has started to draw a map towards the future that we want to see specifically for women. Something else is there's more recognition to entrench gender policies within all spaces that we work with, whether it's at national or subnational levels, whether it's in the corporates, there is more acceptance as to mainstreaming of gender. This is being followed, and whether there are markers or indicators that we're able to measure on progress, that's another story. But I think it's important to recognize a few milestones that we've been able to make. Then organizations like WiM-Africa that are able to champion women's issues at a regional and global level. AWAKE is a national level organization, but I know many other organizations that champion for women's rights and women's opportunities across the continent and globally. And that in itself, I think, is an achievement for women. Then finally, there is the non-technical aspects of mining or of this sector that has been very technical in the past. Like now with technology, be a geologist, you don't have to be a mining engineer, you don't have to have an environmental background to be able to participate at some level. And I think, again, in your brief presentation, Dr. Comfort, you've alluded to the fact that some of the opportunities that are rising, whether it's in human resource, whether it's in advocacy, whether it's in the legal aspects or supply chain and things like that, still women are able to find spaces to plug into the industry without having the technical knowledge and skills to do that. Now, with all these things that I've talked about, they in themselves are opportunities. They're opportunities for younger women to plug in. They're opportunities for us to have more regional collaboration and integration in terms of supply chains working across. How are we looking at developing and ensure safety and health for women that is standardized? Because seeing like the Mali incident from last month, where 40 women, I think maybe even 50 women lost their lives in a mine accident. Earlier this month in a gold mine as well. So how are we making sure that we're standardizing and we're able to really write safety for women in the mines so that we don't have recurrence of incidences that are then other opportunities, I believe, lie in the policy and advocacy work, but more importantly, in the financing of women. Just an hour or so ago, I came across a post that talked about women being over-mentored and under-financed. So, Dr. Comfort, there's a pitch for you there. As we mentor women, how are we making sure that we are also connecting women to the much needed finance to scale their operations, to be able to operate in a responsible manner and to access the markets? Because all these things need access to resources. If we don't connect them to the right partners who are able to help them, progress, then really this narrative will be a rhetoric that we'll keep engaging in. So I think the work is cut out for us with all the leaders here and the young women that are coming up and really shining. That for me, from where I sit, those are some of the areas that we explore to be able to harness as much value as possible. Thank you.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Madam Mitchele. That was comprehensive in a short time. And I agree with you absolutely that mentored are underfunded. That is very, very true. But then we'll all have a role to play, even awake as well. We have a role to play to make sure we launch relevant programs that boost the funding, like a program we have that we call the Investment Readiness Program at WiM-Africa. This investment readiness came about because when we spoke with the funding partners that could fund the women-led organizations, we discovered that, yes, they are not ready for funding. There are parameters before a funding partner would be interested in you. Everyone that is investing wants their monies secure, through the structure that you have in place. And without one, it is a high risk for them to even contemplate. So these are the areas we are already talking about, and I'm glad that you mentioned it. It shows strong on the needs that we have. If you run a needs assessment, you will see that keeps coming up. It keeps coming up. So thanks very much for showing that. And I know that you are busy. We have a few questions for you. Bess, if you can be a bit patient, let's ask Madam Mitchele a few questions before she leaves. She's in a high-profile event in Addis today, but she had to make room for us. So, Dr. Antonia, I would like you to take a few questions that you had prepared for her so that our young women can learn from her story as well. From being a lawyer to being a leader in the mining sector, that's huge. So we would like Antonia, you can shoot. Thank you again, Madam Mitchele, for coming.
Okay. Thank you, Madam, for that very eye-opening conversation. So if you were going to put forward some recommendations for an African girl child that is interested in, moving forth into the mining industry, what pathway will you ask her to follow?
Wow. I think for everyone here, there isn't any linear path towards, because depending on your goal, then I think foremost, zero in, sort of narrow what you want to do. Because being, everywhere, trying everything sometimes can either, confuse you or be too much to handle. So early on, try and figure out a niche and keep it open, because life changes. I mean, keep an open mind, because things keep shifting. And if anything taught us is COVID, because it came and we had to really rethink some of the strategies that we thought would work. But even so, start to establish a niche early on. The earlier, the better, because then you're able to really target your efforts. Number two, find people who have either journeyed, the path that you want to journey, or are at a place where you think you want to be in the future. Reach out to them and speak to them and ask them about some of the tips that they've been able to achieve, or some of the ways they've been able to do that. Number three, learn your craft. Because while we champion for women, it cannot just be tokenism, where an organization or a company or government is trying to meet a gender quota, and so they hire for the sake of it. You have to know your craft. You have to know, you have to make sure that your skills are up to par to be able to compete at the same playing field with the young or with the men that are already in the sector. So for me, top of my head, those are the three. But keep an open mind, because things keep changing over time. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Madam. You talked about the skills that girls should develop. Could you help and elaborate a bit on that? What kind of skills should young professionals focus on, to future-proof their career in mining? What sectors, what areas do you suggest they move into?
So she's amidst a lot of men in her office or in the space that she's buying. What would be your advice for mitigating gender-based violence in the workplace? We do not even want it happening in the first place. What do you want to say to that? Yeah.
That aspect of gender-based violence, whether it's harassment or actual, exploitation, whatever it is unfortunate, because we see it happening even at the highest levels in the corporate space and others. Now, on prevention, and this is the trickier part, is what I'd advise maybe let me talk about if it happens fast. I know sometimes this is to at your own detriment as a woman, because this is a job either you want really badly or have really had to get into, and then you're experiencing harassment, unwanted advancements, or you find yourself in a situation where you're really backed up against the corner. Do not be afraid to report and to voice this particular aspect, because this will happen to you, it will happen to somebody else, and somebody else will be a recurring and perpetuated culture that will never end. And so if it means, and this is going to need you to be really bold, if it means you taking the stand and maybe bearing the brunt, but having such people pay the price, then I think it's worth the cost. That's a very radical thing to say, I know, but it comes down to that. I don't think there's any other way. And so one of the things that at AWIC we are fighting for is to be able to mainstream safe workspaces for women, whether it's at mine sites, down in rural areas, or even within the office, or within the communities that we live in, just to make sure that these aspects are being voiced and are being reported. And if it's abuse that actually takes place, then report these issues to the relevant authority. However, I'll speak to a different side, and this might sort of be controversial because we've experienced it, for instance, here in Kenya, where we had very high rising level of femicide. But I will encourage also all women and young women, sometimes depending on the environment you're in, you are your first you know sister's keeper. You are, you need to be able to make sure that you are in a safe space. So, these drinks with colleagues that people sometimes, you get invited to, we need to interact and we need to network. But anytime you're able to sense that this could be more than, just, an opportunity to network, then I'll encourage us to, stay away from such spaces. And we were in a breakfast with women leaders in the sector, and they said, these guys go golfing and they go for cocktails in the evening. But some women have to stay away because they know about what goes on in such events where, a male colleague takes the opportunity and, blame the alcohol to behave misinappropriately or inappropriately with you, or to touch you inappropriately. So I think it's also avoiding spaces where there's prevalence of, or opportunities where someone can take advantage of, of us. But ultimately, even in such a situation, then don't shy away from reporting. And I know there's normal terms of, oh, maybe you call this upon yourself. And, we hear about all these things that women get told as victims of violence, and yet that's not the case. So hardline report to the highest level possible. And if it's abused, then this needs to be, it's a crime. But also we take care of ourselves by avoiding any situations that could put us in a vulnerable state where abuse or, or violence can be meted against us. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks very much to that. You should, to add to what Madam Mitchele has said, have a consciousness of a zero tolerance to such occurrence. Don't make yourself vulnerable. Don't be in spaces, like she said, that makes you vulnerable to gender advancing, men advancing inappropriately towards you. Like she said, when they are drunk, they say, oh, I didn't know, but it's going to continue in the office as well, as it has just gotten started. So avoid it by all means, know the rules in that space, and be professional. Be professional. Because sometimes, controversially too, let me say, some of us, we are so friendly and so amenable. Your body language is showing a command to a man, and then when it happens, we tend to like cry out. So if you put prevention at the center of whatever you do when you are at work, you are professional, you know your job, you have your skill intact, and you don't need favors that could lead to your vulnerability, then you'll be fine. So thank you very much, Madam Mitchele. We would let you go, but before then, just in case you have advice that you have prepared that you have not aired yet, we'll let you take another, round to speak before you go. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'll also encourage young women here to be innovative. I know we are not all creative, but I think the opportunities that we are really seeking aren't as many as we may think. And so let's think outside the box. Let's think about solutions that the industry needs that other people haven't thought about or haven't developed them. And let's be able to offer value beyond the skill set that we've acquired, the work, through either our training and things like that. Because I think there are a lot of opportunities, like I've mentioned, the landscape is shifting from just purely very technical aspects to other softer aspects that women can plug into and thrive in. So in addition to everything else, that's that. Feel free to reach out to me anytime, either on email or via LinkedIn, and we can connect should you have more questions. Thank you, and thank you for WiM-Africa for this opportunity. I think it's a great initiative, and I really applaud you for doing it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll still like you to be on listening only mode, maybe with your earpiece, as you're going to put your program at Addis. Thank you so much for coming. You're doing a lot of work in your own space as well, and we look forward to really collaborating